23rd chapter, beginning at the first verse. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to the disciples, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love places of honor at banquets and the most important seats at the synagogue. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplace and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers and sisters. And do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant, for those who exalt themselves will be Before we start the sermon, I must just tell you a story. I might have told it to you before, I hope not. But that opening hymn, Holy, 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 is one hymn that I can sing all 4 verses absolutely off the top of my head. And the reason for that was because when I was out in Lichtenberg, one of my congregations, a congregation in Schweizer-Reinicke, which was about 200 kilometers. I'm not sure if it has the same tune in the Afrikaans church. That might explain it, because the congregation was to a person virtually Afrikaans. But it was definitely their favorite hymn. It stood me in very good stead, because I used to go down once a week to spend a day with them. And driving back, usually very late at night, at about 11 o'clock or 10:30 at night, 200 kilometers, I found on occasions the best way to stay awake was to put down the window, put your head out into the wind, and sing Holy, Holy, Holy as loudly as you could. While I'm on that, when I used to go down there, the congregation always used to sit at the back of the church, and I knew that that was because my political views and my involvement in the resettlement areas did not meet with their approval. I'm not sure the reason here. I have changed my deodorant, so feel free. Right, let's start. When I was at theological college, a German theologian by the name of Norman Gottwald wrote a book called The Tribes of Yahweh. And in it, he made an incredible statement that has been picked up by other scholars, including Walter Brueggemann. He said, the one event in the Old Testament that cannot even be questioned or disputed beyond any other story is absolute truth, is the story of the burning bush. And his reason for it was, he said, in that encounter in the desert, Moses meets a God who is totally and radically unlike any other God in history. He is a God who hears the voice of the poor and the marginalized and the needy, who cares about them. In fact, cares about them at times even more than he cares about the wealthy and the successful. A God who is passionate about justice. And he said, no other God in the ancient world, or probably even today, is the same. So he said, wherever it happened, however it happened, whether the story is told accurately or not, that event happened. Moses met a God like no other. And it was out of that encounter, you'll remember, Moses goes back to Egypt and engages with Pharaoh and eventually leads the people out into the promised land. It's a conflict in Egypt between the power structures of the world and the God of the poor and the marginalized. And that God wins. And when they come to Sinai, God makes a covenant with them. He says to them, if you will be my people, then you will be blessed. And they make a covenant with him. We want to be your people. And he gives them a law, Torah, a way of life. And what's significant about that way of life is again the rules. If you take the Ten Commandments, which really summarize much of what it's all about. It is, as some scholars have said, and one scholar has used the word as a verb, it is a way of othering. In other words, the commandments are all about the other. The one who is God, the other. How do you behave? How do you live in relationship with that other? And then the second half of the Ten Commandments is the other who is my neighbor. How do we live in relationship to that other who is my neighbor? And so, as I say, one scholar uses the word othering as a verb. He says that's the call that God gives to the people. You will other. You will live in relationship with others, with God and with neighbors. And all your life will be built on that and will be based on that. Today's Old Testament story is the story of Joshua giving instructions as they prepare to cross over into the promised land. If you read the opening chapters of Joshua, you will find Joshua taking over from Moses. And I imagine that for Joshua, taking over from Moses must have been like trying to take over from Madiba. This great man who had brought the people from slavery to freedom. And now he's gone, and they are about to enter this promised land that has been given to them, and Joshua has been chosen to stand in the breach. And if you read that first chapter of the book of Joshua, you'll find that the whole of the chapter is God speaking to Joshua, saying, be strong, be confident, trust me. I will do great things. I will do it. But keep my law. And so Joshua, going into the promised land, is reminded that to live covenant, to other, is at the heart of this identity of the special people of God. And he leads them across in a crossing into the Holy Land that is no less dramatic than the crossing of the Red Sea. The Exodus begins with a crossing, it ends with a crossing, And the beginning of the promised land it begins with God's mighty act of taking them across a flooded river. Interesting that when Joshua tells the people to prepare for the crossing, he doesn't talk about what's going to happen on the other side. He doesn't talk about the struggles, about the war, about the division of land, about any of the things they're going to do. He says one thing: consecrate yourselves. Consecrate yourselves. So what does that mean? Well, the word actually means being set apart. Allow yourselves, prepare yourselves to be set apart. How? To be set apart, to be a holy people, God's people, living the strange, othering way of living that is going to be totally alien and foreign to the world around. It's going to be a new way of existing, a new way of living. And one of the things that I find interesting, if you go back to the book, The Tribes of Yahweh by Gottwald, he says early excavations of the settlements in the Holy Land show that all the houses that the Israelites built were identical in every respect except as to size. In other words, if you have 10 children, you're allowed a slightly bigger house than me. But other than that, there's no difference in the house. There are no homes for the rich and others for the poor. No shanty towns and palaces. Everyone lives the same. Othering to each other, what it means to be in relationship with God and with each other. Today is our dedicated Giving Sunday, where we begin with those words, consecrate yourselves. So what does it mean for you and for me? I want to suggest that it means exactly the same as it meant for the Israelites as they crossed into the Holy Land. We are called to be a people set apart. Be holy, the Bible instructs, even as your God is holy. And the word holy means set apart. Be set apart because you are God's person. That's what it's all about. Be set apart. We're called not to be like the people around us. We're called to be visibly different. Let me throw a little throwaway comment that shocked me this past week. I was reading some surveys of different denominations and different religions that have been conducted around the world. And do you know that 7 out of every 10 Muslims say our ethical lifestyle is consistent or needs to be consistent with our faith? Only 50% of Christians say so. Might explain to some extent why people are being drawn to Islam, because they see the difference. We're called to be a people different from the world around. We're called here as the people of God to other in such a way that our lives show that we live in intimate relationship with God and that we live in intimate relationship with each other. And that relationship, if you go back to the Jewish law, is very clear. Care for others. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Not just with respect, but with generosity. And you've heard me say it before, but it's worth saying again. The Jewish law is the only legal system in the history of the world that legislates charity. It's not an optional extra if you happen to be feeling in a good mood and the guy standing at the street corner looks desperate enough. You will do it. Because I, the Lord your God, saw what you were when you were slaves in Egypt, therefore you shall. Non-negotiable. And what's more, tough one, if you give money, you can't expect it back. So, other, your neighbor, other, your God. And that's the challenge for us. Because you see, Dedication Giving Sunday isn't just about money. Yes, it's about money, but it's about much more. It's saying, are you willing to consecrate yourself and set yourself apart to be other than the world, and to other the world, and to other your God, and to other your creation, to care for that which God cares about. It's actually something Jesus took very seriously. When he was asked to teach the disciples to pray, do you remember his prayer? May your kingdom come here, on earth, even as it is in heaven. In other words, God, may your other kingdom, or an othering kingdom, here happen here, in this place. May people coming here see it. May we establish that vision you have for the world here and make it real in our lives and in our place. And that's the challenge for us, that we are meant to be a people set apart to make God visible. The Jews were called to be God's special people, not as privilege, but as responsibility, to be a light, to lighten the rest of the world. And that's your task and my task, to be a people othering in such a way that people look at it and say, I don't know what it is that they've got, but whatever it is, I want that too. And so, today we're being asked to consecrate ourselves. It's much more than saying, yes, Lord, I believe. It means, Lord, I give myself to you 100%. Everything I am. I'm here, Lord, to other, as you call me to other. To make your kingdom visible in every word I speak, in every action I have. Lord, take me, every bit of me. Take all my gifts. Take all my time. Take all my money. Build your kingdom here, Lord, in this world. And I want to say to you that the early church tried to do that. Twice in the Acts of the Apostles, we read that the early church held everything in common. They pooled all their time, talents, resources, and money in order to build that kingdom. Sadly, it didn't last terribly well. And 2,000 years later, I'm preaching a sermon that says, please, let's try for a moment to other, to be what God calls us to be. As we come to our dedicated giving, you'll be asked to consecrate yourself. And then as a part of that consecration, to give God money that can be used to other the people on earth, to other the work of God. to give to make God's kingdom come here on earth, even as it is in heaven. It's a big challenge, but hear the words of God to Joshua. Be courageous, be brave, be bold. I will do a great thing. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop Brian, for your stirring words. And I found it very inspiring when I heard them yesterday for the first time, and again today. So we come together now as a parish to consecrate ourselves before God. And I think in Brian's words, find ourselves set apart for his purposes. I like the idea of othering as we seek out the other in God and the other in our neighbor and love them in the same way that he loves us. And I like the phrase dedicated living, a giving of our whole selves to God. You'll notice in the bulletin, Paul Siaki is preaching at the next service, and he's suggesting that quite often what we do is we give our best leftovers. And in fact, that's not what it's about. It's about giving our very best. Now, we have been giving you online and in the email and at the back a letter and a time and talents form, because of course dedication is not just financial, it's giving of our time, our talents, our whole being. I see we've run out of those, but if anyone, you've got some more there. Most of you will have already filled in a form. But if you haven't, while others come up, you have the opportunity to go and quickly fill in a form, get some help from the sidesman, and then place that form folded in the slot in the box. Even if you don't have the form with you because you've sent it online to save paper, then just come up and kneel briefly and commit yourself to the Lord. And then we will say this prayer, this litany together afterwards as an act of commitment. So while Johan plays some music for us, let's just come up one by one and all at once, if you like, and commit ourselves to God's purposes.